Hello, and welcome to part two of our talk on significant women in the lineage of Christ. Now, in part one, we were last speaking about David and Bathsheba and their adulterous affair, which resulted in David getting Bathsheba pregnant. So now, starting in verse 6, we find that David sends a message to his commander that's at war, Joab, to send him Uriah the Hittite. Now, though Uriah is not an Israelite, he's a Hittite, he is living near David at the time. He had to be living very near David because David saw Bathsheba bathing from his rooftop when he was on his rooftop. Uriah is the husband of Bathsheba, and he is a soldier in David's army. Not just any soldier, but a very loyal servant of David. So David sent for him to come, and when he came, David basically told him that he had been doing a good job and he deserved a break and he should go home and be with his wife. Now, David's plan was that Bathsheba wasn't very far along during the time in her pregnancy. So if Uriah were to go home and sleep with her, then he may think the child was his and David could cover up his sin. But his plan didn't work. It backfired because Uriah would not leave his side. He slept at the king's house, chapter 11 states. He would not go home. So when Uriah would not go home and sleep with his wife, David hatched another plan. So he wrote a letter to Joab, his commander, and he sent this letter by Uriah to Joab. And basically the letter says, put Uriah on the front line so that he will be killed. So David committed murder when he purposely sent this man to his death. So now let's take a look at the last two verses in chapter 11. That's verses 26 and 27. So far, David has gotten a woman pregnant that was married to another man and sent her husband to death. Now, Bathsheba, it doesn't say a lot about Bathsheba. It doesn't tell whether she was a willing participant in the affair. During this time, women were viewed as property, and David was the king. So even if she had wanted to resist David, she didn't have any rights to. So she just had to go along with it, whether she wanted the affair or not. And the Bible doesn't explain that. It doesn't go into detail whether she wanted the affair or not. It just said that she participated in it, became pregnant, and notified David she was pregnant. So, chapter 11, verse 26 and 27. When the wife of Uriah heard that Uriah, her husband, was dead, she mourned for her husband. So, see, she still was in love with her husband. She still cared for him. He was a good man. And when her mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. And thus ends chapter 11. So God was very displeased with David for having this affair with this married woman, getting her pregnant, and then murdering her husband. So chapter 12 starts off with Nathan the prophet coming to David and telling him that a story. He tells him a parable about a man who did a great wrong. And David gets upset with it and tells Nathan how the man should be punished. At this point, Nathan points out to David that he is that man. He is that man that stole his neighbor's wife and murdered her husband. And that God was displeased with him, and that because of his sin, his son would die. So the child that Bathsheba conceived during her affair with David, she bore the child, and then the child died. But Bathsheba's story doesn't end there, because we see later on in the book of 2 Samuel that Bathsheba was very important to the story of the ancestry of Christ. Now, had David and Bathsheba not gotten ahead of the will of God and had an adulterous affair, and then David had Uriah murdered, had they just waited, because Uriah was a loyal servant, he had not intended to leave the war until it was over. Had they just waited and not got ahead of God's will and things had happened in the order they were supposed to, I believe David would have ended up with Bathsheba anyways, because Bathsheba became the mother of a very important king, and that was Solomon. Now, we read that in Matthew chapter 1 in the lineage of Christ. Okay, when we go back to Matthew chapter 1 and look at verses 16 and 17, we see that the next person that was begot in chapter 16 was Jacob, and then Jacob begot Joseph, who was the husband of Mary, the mother of Christ. So, this is the lineage of Christ through his foster father, Joseph, who was descended from Solomon, whose mother was Bathsheba. So she played a very important role in that she was the mother of all these generations that led down to Joseph, who fathered Christ, or who was the adoptive or foster father, we shall say, who raised Christ. So, now let's take a look at Luke and look at Mary's lineage, because the genealogy of Christ is documented in Matthew through Joseph's line, and it's documented in Luke through Mary's line. Because Matthew says that Joseph was begotten from Jacob. Now, in Luke chapter 3, verse 23, Luke's genealogy is a little different. It starts off, it goes backwards. It doesn't say this person begot that person. It says the son of this person, the son of that person. So let's look at verse 23. Now Jesus himself began his ministry at about 30 years of age, being as was supposed. And as was supposed, that means they supposed he was the son of Joseph, who was the son of Heli. Now, Matthew said Joseph was begotten from Jacob. So, this is very important. Now it's saying he's the son of Heli. This means he is the son-in-law of Heli. Heli was Mary's father. Let's go back and think. Women were considered property. So when they did these genealogies, they did not document the mother. Now in Matthew, that author documented Joseph, who was married to Mary, who was Joseph, who was married to Mary, who was the mother of Christ. But it still documents the lineage of Joseph. It doesn't say her lineage. Here it's talking about her lineage, but it's calling him the son of Heli. Then we'll skip down to verse 31, says the son of Meliah, the son of Menon, the son of Mathath, the son of Nathan, the son of David. So Nathan, the son of David. This is another reason of Bathsheba's importance. This is another reason she was significant. She was also the mother of Nathan. So Bathsheba went on. She started off in an adulterous affair with David. That's how we met her, bathing outside, and then David sent for her and had an affair with her. Then she goes on to mother two very important men who were ancestors of the parents of Christ. So, if David and Bathsheba had stayed in God's will and waited, she would have had a significant role anyways, but because they got out of God's will and had an affair, and then David had her husband killed, that's why that's why God took her first child by David. Stay tuned for part 3, and we'll be right back.